devastated by these comments, and so all I'll say is just, it's obviously...
No one expected it to end like this. The WNBA believed it had finally found its breakthrough moment, the moment everything would change forever. $1 million salary was placed on the table, a contract wrapped in gold and symbolism, a deal meant to silence every critic who claimed the league could not compete financially with the bigger sports giants. Inside league headquarters, executives were convinced this historic offer would be the grand finale, the triumphant conclusion to months of tense bargaining. But instead of applause, they got an earthquake. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart, and the rest of the Players Association did the unthinkable. They did not celebrate. They did not negotiate. They walked away from the table completely. And for the first time in league history, a labor decision sent shockwaves that rattled the commissioner's chair itself. Sources inside the WNBA front office describe the aftermath as absolute chaos. Phones never stopped ringing. Legal teams scrambled. Owners demanded answers. And then the biggest bombshell of all began to spread through the hallways, whispered from one executive to another. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert was reportedly done. Her tenure, once praised for corporate growth and financial expansion, now stood on the edge of collapse. This wasn't just a rejected contract. This was a vote of no confidence, a message from the players that the leadership guiding their futures no longer represented them. It was a moment years in the making, fueled by rising tensions, public missteps, and a generation of athletes who refused to accept the old rules. To understand why this $1 million offer turned into a turning point, you have to look deeper. Because behind the headlines and viral tweets lies a revolution that has been growing quietly inside locker rooms, practice facilities, and private group chats. A revolution built on numbers, power, and a simple realization. The players had more leverage than they ever imagined, and for the first time, they were ready to use it. At first glance, $1 million salary sounds like a victory. It's a number that turns heads, a milestone that suggests the league has finally arrived. The casual fan might see it as the dawn of a new era, a shining example of progress. But to Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart, and their fellow stars, it was a glaring insult. A token gesture that ignored the real math. The billions flowing into the league from media deals, ticket sales, and merchandise. The WNBA had just signed a landmark media rights deal worth over $2 billion across the next decade. For any sports executive, this is transformative money. Yet, the offer on the table capped the players' salaries at a fraction of what the league would earn from their talent and their sweat. For the stars, this wasn't about greed. It was about fairness. It was about claiming the slice of the pie they had been generating all along. Every sold-out arena, every jersey flying off the shelves, every primetime broadcast, this was their work, their impact, their brand. And they were being asked to settle for far less than their worth. Union leaders had made it clear. The players wanted more than a salary bump. They demanded equity, revenue sharing, and a real stake in the league they were building with every dunk, every highlight reel, every sold-out game. They wanted a percentage of the profits that were already flowing past the corporate offices and into the owners' pockets. Rejecting the contract wasn't a rejection of progress. It was a rejection of a business model that undervalued the women who made it possible. For the league office, this was shocking. They had assumed $1 million offer would be enough to secure peace, to quiet the critics, and to present a public image of harmony. Instead, they were met with unity and defiance, a clear message that the players were done accepting crumbs. Behind closed doors, whispers turned into panic. Front office executives and owners realized the impossible. They had underestimated not just the players' influence, but their willingness to wield it. The stage was set. The players had drawn a line in the sand. And at the center of it all stood Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner who had overseen a decade of corporate growth, now facing the reality that financial figures alone could no longer command loyalty or respect. The era of unquestioned top-down control was over. Kathy Engelbert had long been seen as the architect of the WNBA's corporate success. She was a numbers person, a strategist, the type of leader who could balance spreadsheets and contracts with ease. Under her watch, the league's valuation skyrocketed, and the WNBA became a serious contender in the sports business world. But numbers alone cannot lead a league built on human talent. And when the very athletes who drive the business turn against you, no amount of financial acumen can save you. The cracks in Engelbert's leadership have been visible for years. Travel policies that forced players onto commercial flights while executives enjoyed charters. Prioritization rules that forced athletes to choose between lucrative overseas contracts and their WNBA obligations, effectively penalizing them for seeking financial stability. Public interviews where she skirted questions about harassment, racism, and online abuse, instead offering corporate platitudes that compared player struggles to old NBA rivalries. Each misstep eroded trust, planting seeds of frustration and resentment that would later bloom into open revolt. When a $1 million offer was rejected, it wasn't just a blow to the league's negotiating table. It was a public humiliation for Engelbert. The players had exposed the limits of her authority. What she thought would be a triumphant moment of control had instead become the clearest evidence that her era of leadership was over. The WNBA's top stars weren't merely refusing to sign. They were demanding a new system, one where their contributions were recognized and valued. Board members and owners began questioning everything. Could Engelbert continue to lead a league where her decisions no longer inspired respect? Was she capable of bridging the growing gap between corporate priorities and player empowerment? Internal discussions reportedly turned heated, and the first rumors of resignation started to circulate. According to sources close to the league, Engelbert's departure was not voluntary. It was a strategic necessity. She had become a symbol of the old way of doing things, slow, corporate, out of touch, and ultimately unable to adapt to the new reality of women's sports. The fallout didn't stop at the boardroom. Social media erupted with speculation, debates, and viral posts analyzing every word from players, executives, and insiders. Fans watched as a historic confrontation unfolded, a clash between tradition and transformation, between control and empowerment. The league had entered uncharted territory, and Engelbert's resignation was just the beginning of a seismic shift that would redefine women's basketball forever. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart. The names alone carried weight, influence, and a newfound authority that no one in the WNBA office could ignore. These women weren't just athletes. They were the heartbeat of the league, the engine that drove ticket sales, merchandise, and global attention. When they united, they wielded a power that transcended the court. The rejection of the $1 million offer was more than a labor decision. It was the opening salvo of a revolution. For decades, the WNBA had operated under a mindset that the league was doing women a favor. Players were expected to be grateful for the opportunity, to accept low salaries, limited travel accommodations, and minimal marketing attention. But the Clark era shattered that illusion. Her presence brought millions of new eyes to arenas, sold-out crowds, and record-breaking merchandise revenue. She didn't just play the game. She transformed the league into a spectacle that demanded attention. And the players, watching the economic impact unfold, realized something crucial. They were the architects of this growth, yet they were still treated like secondary citizens. The union, emboldened by their stars' influence, began pushing for more than just salaries. They demanded revenue sharing, a piece of every ticket sold, every broadcast aired, every jersey purchased. They weren't just negotiating for themselves. They were setting a precedent for generations of women in sports. By rejecting the offer, they were signaling that the era of accepting crumbs was over. The power dynamics had shifted. The players were no longer employees. They were partners, stakeholders, and if the league refused to adapt, a force capable of reshaping the entire landscape. Meanwhile, the WNBA's leadership faced an existential dilemma. If the top stars refused to sign, the league's growth trajectory was at risk. Missing games, delaying the season, or even facing a partial lockout could undo years of progress. And yet, the players were prepared to stand their ground. understanding the leverage they had built through public influence, union solidarity, and alternative opportunities like Unrivaled, a new league offering equity, high salaries, and a player-first environment. Suddenly, the WNBA was no longer the only game in town. This was a turning point. The message was clear: the old rules no longer applied. The Stars had forced the league to acknowledge that women's basketball had evolved, and anyone hoping to maintain control without adapting to the new reality would be left behind. The revolution had begun, and Engelbert's departure was merely the first casualty. While the WNBA scrambled to recover from the shock of the rejected offer, another player quietly entered the scene: Unrivaled. Founded by stars like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, this new league was more than a side project. It was a direct challenge to the WNBA's monopoly. Unrivaled offered players not only lucrative short-term contracts, but also equity in a player-first environment that the WNBA had consistently failed to provide. For the top athletes, it was proof that alternatives existed, and with alternatives came leverage. The existence of Unrivaled changed the calculus entirely. No longer did the WNBA control the narrative, the contracts, or the careers of its stars. The players could walk away from the league, take their talents elsewhere, and force the owners to reconsider how business was done. Suddenly, the $1 million offer, once considered generous, looked like a trap, a symbolic gesture that ignored the reality of the league's explosive growth and the billions it was projected to make. Inside the league office, panic set in. Executives realized that Engelbert's inability to recognize the threat of Unrivaled had weakened their position. The players were not just asking for a bigger slice. They had built their own bakery. This move transformed the labor negotiation from a salary discussion into a battle over the future structure and control of women's basketball. Engelbert had failed to adapt, to see the players as partners rather than employees, and now the owners were scrambling to fix the damage. Public perception amplified the pressure. Mainstream media tried to frame the narrative as the players being greedy or ungrateful for rejecting a seven-figure salary. But fans, armed with social media and first-hand knowledge of the players' influence, saw it differently. They understood the math, the billions in revenue, and the vast inequities that persisted. The players weren't rejecting progress. They were demanding justice. Every tweet, post, and highlight reel underlined their importance, proving that the WNBA stars were now the decision-makers in the league's destiny. The combination of Unrivaled's existence and the players' collective power left the WNBA in a precarious position. The league could no longer rely on traditional corporate strategies, and Engelbert's resignation, whether voluntary or forced, became an inevitability. Her departure symbolized the end of the old guard and opened the door for a new era, one where players were no longer silent, where their contributions were recognized, and where leadership would be measured not by spreadsheets alone, but by respect, trust, and partnership. The news of Kathy Engelbert's resignation sent shockwaves through the WNBA and beyond. Corporate press releases painted a picture of mutual parting, full of gratitude for her service and praise for the league's growth. But behind the polished statements, insiders knew the truth. This was a forced exit, a calculated move by the owners to reset negotiations and prevent a full-scale labor crisis. Engelbert had become a liability, the symbol of a leadership style that could no longer command respect from the players who fueled the league's success. The timing of her departure was too precise to be coincidental. The CBA rejection had just occurred, media attention was at a fever pitch, and the players' leverage had never been stronger. By removing Engelbert, the owners could attempt to press the reset button, presenting a new face to the union and the public, signaling a willingness to compromise, while attempting to maintain control over the league's direction. Yet, for many, this move only confirmed that the players' pressure worked. Their unified stance, their refusal to accept a cap on their earnings, had forced the highest-level leadership to step aside. For the players, this was more than a symbolic victory. It was proof that their influence extended beyond the court and into the boardrooms. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart, and others had reshaped the power dynamic. demonstrating that they could affect real change without resorting to public conflict or threats. The phrase "bet on women" had evolved from a slogan into a demand. Pay women fairly, respect their contributions, and acknowledge their stake in the business. The players' collective action forced the league to confront a harsh reality. Without the stars, the WNBA could not function. At the same time, fans and analysts began to speculate about what came next. Who would step into Engelbert's shoes? Could a former player bridge the gap and restore trust? Or would another corporate executive risk repeating the mistakes of the past? And what about the looming 2026 season? A delayed or canceled season could undermine the league's growth. But the players had shown they were prepared to take that risk if it meant securing equity and fairness. Engelbert's resignation also sent a message to other leagues and sports executives. Women's basketball was no longer a space where authority could dictate terms unchallenged. The balance of power had shifted, and the players had firmly planted themselves at the center of that new reality. As the WNBA scrambled to stabilize the league and negotiate a new deal, the entire landscape of women's sports had been irreversibly altered. With Engelbert gone and negotiations hanging in the balance, the WNBA stands at a crossroads. The resignation is not merely a personnel change. It signals a profound shift in the league's culture, leadership, and power structure. The stars have made it unmistakably clear. They're no longer passive participants in a system that undervalues their contributions. This is their league, their platform, and their revolution. The players have set a new standard. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Breanna Stewart have demonstrated that influence extends far beyond highlight reels and box scores. Their refusal to accept the $1 million cap was not about ego. It was about asserting control over their careers, ensuring equity, and reshaping a league that had long prioritized profit over fairness. Every move they make now sends a message. The WNBA cannot thrive without respecting the athletes at its core. Meanwhile, the league faces an urgent challenge: finding leadership that can navigate this new reality. The next commissioner will have to be a wartime leader, someone who understands the business, commands respect from players, and can bridge the widening gap between ownership and talent. The position is no longer just about managing contracts or growing revenue. It is about building trust, fostering collaboration, and acknowledging that the players are partners, not mere employees. The broader impact of this moment extends far beyond the WNBA. Fans, sponsors, and media outlets are witnessing a paradigm shift in women's sports. The players' collective action proves that they are not beholden to outdated hierarchies. They can demand fair compensation, challenge leadership, and shape the league's future. Their influence is a testament to what happens when talent, strategy, and unity converge. And yet, the story is far from over. The 2026 season hangs in the balance, with the possibility of delayed or canceled games looming over the league. Unrivaled and other alternative opportunities continue to offer competition, ensuring the WNBA must evolve or risk losing relevance. But one thing is certain: the power dynamic has shifted irreversibly. The stars now call the shots, the league must listen, and the era of silent acquiescence is over. This is more than a labor dispute. It is a cultural turning point. It is a declaration that women's basketball is no longer content to exist in the shadows of the corporate machine. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and their fellow players have rewritten the rules. The commissioner's resignation is a historic marker, the first domino in a revolution that will redefine equity, respect, and leadership in women's sports. The future of the WNBA is unwritten, but one thing is clear: it will be led by the players for the players, and they are ready to take it to heights no one dared imagine.
Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into Hollywood's hidden history.